Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Monday. Today is day 26 of NTI, and we're going to be reviewing Module 3, Equivalent Fractions. This will be a really short lesson because we're just going to be working on this one single page here. And so I hope you had a great weekend. Welcome back. You just have these 5 days this week, and so stay strong. You can do this. First, we're going to start with when working to find an equivalent fraction. I'm reading this right here. When you're working to find an equivalent fraction, you can multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, okay? And you could really pick any number that you want. Sometimes it'll have to be specific when you're adding and subtracting and trying to get a common denominator, but you're not quite there yet. That'll be the next tomorrow's lesson. So, for example, this has 2/3. And so if I want to find an equivalent fraction, sorry, that should be a line there, for 2/3, I can multiply the numerator and the denominator by something that's equivalent to 1. So that's why we say you could multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, because essentially, let's say I just pick 4. So I'm going to multiply the numerator by 4, and I'm going to multiply the denominator by 4. If I wrote this as a fraction, it would be 4/4, which is equal to 1 whole. And if you multiply something by 1 whole, like if I multiply 5 times 1, what am I going to get? Exactly, 5. I'm going to get something equivalent to what you started with. And so that's what we want. So that's why when we multiply a fraction, multiply to get an equivalent fraction, you can multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number, or basically it's a fraction equal to 1. We just don't you can put the line here. Doesn't make a difference. You don't have to put the line there, but you can. And so an equivalent fraction for 2/3, 2 times 4 is 8, and 3 times 4 is 12. Sorry about that. Kind of looks like a Okay, and so an equivalent fraction for 2/3 could be 8/12. But then again, there's a lot. Like I said up here, you can pick as long as the numerator and denominator are the same. Because remember, you want it to be equivalent to a whole. So I could pick 2 halves here. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 2 is 6. So 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. You are multiplying the numerators by 2, the denominator by 2, and 2 halves is essentially equal to 1 whole, and so that's why you end up with an equivalent fraction. If I were to draw this, oh, whoa, sorry about that. Y'all like Miss Grigsby, work on your drawing skills here. Sorry about that. Let's say that I shaded 2/3. Okay, now I'm going to try my best here. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so shade. That's not good, but that's okay. Shade. Okay. So I have 2 out of 3 shaded. This is not perfect, but bear with me. So I'm going to change colors here because I'm going to show you what happens when you split these two. When you create in this 2 out of 3, and you cut it and you multiply it by a half, halves, halves. I now have, and I'm going to change my color again here so I can show you. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, that shows that it is equivalent. I know that's not the best picture, but 2/3 and 4/6. Let's say it was a pizza. 2/3 of a pizza, 4/6 of the pizza, exactly the same amounts. Okay. All right, let's keep going. I think you're probably like, okay, Miss Crispy, we get it. All right, so let's look at 1/4. So something we wrote for 2/3, we said 4/6 was equivalent. We also said 8/12. If you want to pause the video and try to write down some more for 2/3, you're more than welcome. And so we had 4/6 was equivalent here, and we also had 8/12 was equivalent. And of course, there are many more fractions. We only multiplied by 4/4 and 2 halves. So, all right, let's look at 1/4. So again, when you're finding an equivalent fraction, if you get to make it up, or if you're trying to find a fraction that's equivalent to it from a multiple choice answer, you need to make sure that the numerator and denominator are being multiplied by the same number to get your equivalent fraction. So let's multiply by 3's. Okay, and again, essentially we're multiplying by 3/3. But we don't have to, write it out like that. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 4 times 3 is 12. So 3/12 is an equivalent fraction for 1/4. Okay. Let me fix those really quick. Let's write 4, 6. Oops. 8, 12. Okay. And then, so we just did 1 for 1/4. And it was 3/12. So, and again, there can be as many as you want because you can decide. But if there's a multiple choice, you're going to have to make sure you're going to have to try and figure out what the numerator and denominator multiplying by to get equivalent fraction. So now we have 3/8. And so again, I want to make sure that I'm multiplying by the same numerator and denominator, which means that it's equal to a whole. So let's choose 5/5. And so 3 times 5 is 15, and 8 times 5 is 40. And so 15/40 would be an equivalent fraction for 3/8. All right, I think you get the idea there. So let's move down to my next sentence. It says, when working to simplify a fraction. Now, um, our modules in math are not, super, super strict on that, but um, it's important that you simplify or go to lowest terms. And so in that case, you would divide the numerator and denominator by the same number, okay? So for example, 12/15. Now you're going to have, this is what I tell my students all the time. Can this fraction be simplified? Well, of course, I'm going to put 3 over here that you can, but can this fraction be simplified? Sorry about that. And yes, it can. And I always ask them, is there a number that you could count by that would hit both 12 and 15? That's what I always ask them. Start with 2. Well, if I count by 2s, I'm not going to hit 15 because it's not an even number. So go up to 3. If I count by 3s, will I hit 12 and 15? And the answer is yes. So 12 divided by 3 and 15 divided by 3. And this is simplifying. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. And so in this case, there is not a number that we can count by that would hit 4 and 5. And so 12/15 simplified is 4/5. Okay? The next one is 3/6. So again, I asked my students, is there a number that you could count by that would hit both 3 and 6? And this one, people are like, yeah, of course, you could count by 3s. Yes. And dividing by 3 again there. It's absolutely correct. So remember, we're dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number. 6 divided by 3, or 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. And I always like to look at the half fractions because the halves, 3 is half of 6. So that would simplify to half. Have you ever seen anything like that? Like, 4/8, you shouldn't even have to think about that. 4 is half of 8. So that would simplify to 1/2. These are things that we should know and mentally in our mind. Or like 50 hundredths. Okay, 50 is half of 100. Therefore, it would simplify to half. Okay, all right, let's do our last one down here. We have 8/24. Now, this is a little bit more challenging, but I'm going to let you try. So, 8/24. And again, I ask my students, first and foremost, something that they would tell me is, well, Mr. Grigsby, they're both even. Yes, they are. And every even number can be divided by 2, and you can. The only thing with that is there is something greater, okay? So I'm going to put both of them on here. Now, 8/24. I'm going to go with people who think, yes, it's even. They're both even. They can both be simplified by 2, absolutely. And so 8 divided by 2, it'll be just a minute. I'm teaching, but thank you. Half of 8 is 4, and half of 24 is 12, okay? Okay, and so again, and now we still have 4 and 12. So my students will be like, Ms. Grigsby, it's still even. Yes, it is. What can I count by that we hit 4 and 12? And they may say, Ms. Grigsby, you can divide by 2 again. Yes, absolutely you can. You can divide since they are both even. So we can divide by 2 again. Remember, no, we're trying to get these numbers to lowest terms. It's kind of like, what does that mean? But like the least numbers possible. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then I would say, can you do anything else there? Is there anything else you can do? And they would say, yeah, it's still even. Yes, you can divide by 2 again. Now, you might be like, okay, Ms. Grigsby, this is taking a lot of work. Yes, when you don't divide by the greatest number possible, you're going to continue simplifying. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now, here, if we go back to that original fraction, and I had asked my students, and they're like, oh, you can count by 2s, they're both even. Yes, true. Is there anything else you could count by to get there? Yes, 4s. And then I might ask them again, is there anything else? Yes, it is actually 8. You can count by 8s to get to 24. So in this case, 8 divided by 8 is 1, and 24 divided by 8 is 3. Do you see how we ended up getting the exact same simplest form fraction? This one took multi-steps because we didn't divide by the greatest number possible. If we had started out dividing by 8, it would have been a one-step simplifying. But up here, we had to simplify 3 different times because we were choosing the least number that you could count by to get to those fraction numerator and denominator, okay? All right, so that's all I have for you today. Those of you at home, you have an assessment on paper. It's called equivalent fractions. Those of you in Google Classroom, you have a Google form to fill out, okay? All right, guys, have a great Monday. I hope you had a good weekend again, and I'll see you tomorrow on Tuesday.